Thank you for that, Pauline. It was a longer reading than we normally have, and yet it is full of so much. And you'll be pleased to hear that I might not be going through it all line by line. But we're starting off this week with a new series. And it's good this is my last Sunday with everybody. And so I'm Paul, Jen's wife, and Jen's husband. So you're going to miss me when I'm gone, aren't you, with these things? So I found it actually really quite hard this week to be able to prepare this sermon. Probably partly because of how special it has been for us during our time here, and the wisdom that you've been able to share and the encouragement even when I make mistakes and get things wrong. It's been a blessing and very meaningful to us, and we're going to miss you all dearly. But Dan sort of sent me the series that he was going to talk on, and I particularly picked this one. And the series that we're going to be looking at over the next few weeks is this: little words, big difference. Little words and a big difference. And that's going to be shaped in a few ways. We're going to be looking at, we can build our lives on Christ's foundation, or we can live under Christ our Lord, and we can come to God through Christ our mediator. And we are secure in Christ, our righteousness. And all of these are phrases that the New Testament uses to try and describe this relationship that we have with Christ and with God. And it's all around these special small words. But I've got the joy this week of being able to look at this one. Or maybe not. Is it okay to move it on to the next one? Okay. Maybe I'll wait and then I might be given it. Oh, there we go. Which is Christ in us, the hope of glory. Christ in us, the hope of glory. And just to give you a bit of structure for this talk, I'm first going to look at who is Jesus, who is the Christ. Then look at Christ in us, and then look at the term hope and glory. And then if either you get lost or if I get lost, hopefully at least this structure will help us find each other again by the end, is what I'm hoping for. But we start off with a bit of a story, because I don't know how you found with your closest friends and with your really good relationships that you've got. I know that I first met Jen when I was a student here in Southampton. I was invited over to a Shrove Tuesday pancake party in which I was given the honour of flipping the pancakes as we celebrated Shrove Tuesday, really as a way of getting to know each other, because we were possibly going to be housemates later on in the next year. And afterwards, we decided that actually we would be housemates along with about 4 with other people. And people would sort of ask me, who are your housemates? Who are you going to be sharing with next year? And I had no problems describing Jen. I was able to say things like, she's, somebody who's really passionate about music. She's studying music. She's a really great musician. And, she's so high, blonde hair, really quirky, short, really enjoy it, really fun company. And so that was quite easy. Rattle that off, move on. It's easy to do. If somebody comes to me now, after a few years of marriage, a few ups and a few downs, a few really painful times, a few times of great joy, and say, who's Jen? I'm a bit like, how can you encapsulate somebody where you've journeyed for so long? You've weathered the storms, you've had somebody, their woundedness, and you're holding it as much as you can. You've experienced somebody holding your woundedness in that. You've laughed at their jokes, their bad behavior at times as well. Not that you would ever believe it, but trust me, it happens. It's really hard to describe, and that's a bit like how we're engaging here with this passage. Somebody once described it, a preacher from the 19th century called Spurgeon sort of said about stuttering to try and describe something. That sense in which you're trying to describe something that's too big to really get our heads around. And so we're firing off different words to try and get hold of something that language fails to do. And that's also a bit like my relationship with God, actually, my relationship with Jesus. When I first became a Christian and people said, who's Jesus? Oh, I could nail that one really quite quick. He's the Son of God, blah, 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 and actually define a lot of things. And now we come, who is this Jesus? At times I can be a bit stumped. Not because these things aren't true or I don't believe them anymore, but actually there's so much more, so much richer. As again, like with my journey with Jen, I've weathered storms. I've had highs, I've had lows. I've had times where I've just felt, actually, Jesus, are you really there? Or this thing about answering prayer, I'm not sure that's really happening, actually. And that's just been this last couple of years, actually. And actually, I still end up stumped. But that's why, actually, in our stutterings, I'm really pleased that not all our stutterings are equal. There's my stutterings, and then there's the words of Paul, inspired by the Holy Spirit, his stutterings, which are like just a throwing of diamonds on the floor. Each one of his statements we could unpack for a very, very long time. Let's just look at a couple of them. First of all, who is this Jesus that we say walked on the earth 2,000 years ago? He's the image of the invisible God. Not like a copy, not like one of my really bad paintings, but actually the very embodiment of God, the divine, present in human form. The firstborn of all creation, not somebody who just was born by Virgin Mary, but actually somebody who existed through all time. The creator of all things, and in him all things hold together. The one who actually created the universe, flung stars into space. Created through millions and millions of years, of the whole earth and the diversity that we experience. But not just created it and left it, but actually who continues to enfold and hold all things together. Whether that's the breath that I take each morning and each moment is sustained by Jesus. If he was not holding things together, things would cease to exist. In him is the fullness of God dwelt. And through him all things are reconciled. So through Jesus, the whole universe, all creation gets reconciled, that we are reconciled to God. What was torn apart and broken, Jesus brings apart and remends. Maybe we should just gaze and think upon who this Jesus is, these riches, these wonder and beauty of who he is. Often we focus on just one thing and dwell on that, but actually the richness and the depth. That's why people are still writing worship songs. That's why some of the old worship songs still speak so powerfully to our hearts, because they're trying to express what cannot really be fully expressed. And yet we've got this term, Christians. I don't know if you've ever really thought about Christians. It's not a term that's actually in the Bible. It's a term, it's only in the Bible sort of once, when it's being referred to actually a group of people at Antioch who was first referred to as being Christians. And some scholars think that actually that was originally a derogatory term. It was what other people referred to them as, because they understood the story of Jesus who died on a cross, and so they would say, which is a thing of shame, and so lump you into that. And yet this group of people heard that and they actually thought, yes, that is who we are. But Christians is people who belong to Christ. That's what that means. But I wonder what it means for you, for if you said, what is a Christian? What is a Christian? Is it somebody who's been baptized? had that special moment of being able to be lowered in the water and being risen up again. That sense of complete forgiveness of sin, that confession of faith. Maybe it's a prayer that's been shared. Maybe some of you have experienced that moment of a prayer where that first prayer or an early prayer where you came to God and you just said, I know that I need you in my life because things aren't right. And I know that I'm not living the life that actually I feel that I've been called to be. And I know that in order to do that, I need to come and say sorry to you and seek forgiveness and know the life that you're giving. Maybe it's that. There are lots of ways in which we might define Christian. But actually, I think sometimes the Bible uses words like adoption into God's family, or, that we've been saved and salvation. Born again. Lots of these different things, but actually they all tie, and they often all come as a consequence of this one thing. And this one thing is that Christ is in us. The faith that we have, that Paul says, is actually, and the reason why Jesus came, is not so that he would stand aloft, but actually so that he would unite humanity and God back together again. It is Christ, this one who flung stars into space, who created all things. This one who holds eternity in his hands, whoever has been and will ever be, is actually within us. In us. This is another one of those mysteries. The Old Testament prophesied about it. In Daniel, it talks about how this day might happen. So Paul, when he was writing this letter, knew the Old Testament that these things were going to be coming true. But before Jesus came, they didn't know how. How was God going to do this? But now, Paul says, this mystery's been revealed. Christ is come. He's reconciled people, and more than that, he is now able to live in us. Live in us. It's one small word, isn't it, that makes such a big difference. In. Jesus didn't come for us. He didn't come as an example to us. But he's come to be and to live within us, to be part of us. Being united or being united with Jesus isn't about us becoming like him. Sometimes with our Christian faith, we sometimes, again, get the horse in front of the cart. I had to think about it to get it the right way. The cart before the horse. Even when I think about it, I get it wrong. But you know the phrase. And actually, sometimes we can think that to be able to be reconciled with Jesus, or to become like him, actually, we've got to become like him. We've got to do the things that Jesus did. We've got to kind of act in the way that Jesus acted. But that's not what brings unity in this case. The unity in this case is that actually Christ came and reconciled and lives in us. That brings the unity. Those other things flow from that, and I'm not saying that that's bad. Absolutely, they're good things, but actually they flow from this. Our unity with God isn't dependent upon quite how we look like, how we sound, whether we feel like we're sounding like what a Christian should be or acting like how a Christian should act. The Christian, whether somebody's a Christian or not, depends on just one thing, and that's Christ in them. That is the unity that binds us all together. But it's not just that. It goes beyond even that. Because it's not just Christ who brings unity by living in us. That act also brings us into connection with the whole Trinity. The whole Trinity. The way in which God relates, God the Father relates to God the Son, we're brought into that intimate personal relationship of relating with us through the Spirit. We're brought into that sense of Trinity, not as an equal partner. We're not divine in that sense, equal to the other three persons of the Trinity, but we're brought into that intimate relationship amongst them because Christ came, because Christ is in us. In John 17, John records a prayer that Jesus prayed just before he ascended into heaven. And it says this. He says, "The glory that you have given me, I have given to them, that they may be even as we are one, I in them and you in me, that they may become perfectly one, so that the world may know that you sent me and loved them, even as you loved me." What words to floor us. What words to floor us. Jesus in us, just as the Father is in him. That the Father loves us, just as the Father loved Jesus, whom he had known for eternity, his Son. Wow. But it goes beyond that. Christ in us, the hope of glory. The hope of glory. This hope of glory is both a now and a future thing. In that bit that I just read in John, it actually said, the glory that I have given. It passed. God has given that glory. But we know that actually there will be a future time where it was fully consummated. It will be fully realized. But what is that glory? What is that glory? What does that mean? I think it means a few things. One thing is it's God's radiance. God's very radiance, God's light. In Ezekiel, there's a passage just about the fact of the glory of God being descending in the church. And we are becoming that temple. We are become that place, that being, that dwelling of God. For we are the dwelling place of God now that he has come to live in us. We are his home. We are his temple, his church, his people. And so let us allow that God's radiance, his glory that is within us, to shine out through our eyes into the lives of the people around us and into each other. It means that God's glory is within us, waiting to be radiating out into the world around us. God's glory is a restoration of the glory that was actually given. This isn't a new thing, but this was what was originally given to Adam and Eve in the garden at the very beginning. That they were the image of God, that they had God's glory. So Jesus has restored us into that glory, so that we may match the attributes of God, that we may be able to show the compassion and the care to other people. Paul picks up this kind of idea again in his letter to Corinthians, and he says, "All of us with unveiled faces, seeing the glory of the Lord as though reflected in a mirror, are being transformed into the same image from one degree of glory to another." That's what our Christian life is about. This is what our life is about. The fact that God the divine has become part of us. And as we walk this life with him, Let us be transformed from glory to glory, helping each other in that process, as you've beautifully helped me and Jen over the years in that process. But continue to do that for each other and for those around us as well. But part of the question is then, Christ in us, the hope of glory. How do we realize that? Maybe some of you are thinking, yeah, these are words that I've heard, but what's the reality? I don't understand. I'm not aware of the reality of that in my life. I think Paul touches on part of that when he talks about faith in the passage that we've just read. He says about you are being reconciled by Christ's physical body through death to present you holy in sight, without blemish and free from accusation. If you continue in your faith, established and firm, do not move from the hope held out in the gospel. So it comes about, yes, through Jesus' death and resurrection. That is the only way in which we are able to be reconciled. And holding on to that faith that Jesus has done all that we need. That's the first stepping stone of being able to recognize this. But then there's also another aspect of it, of actually how do we continue to live and enable that to be a greater experience of our life as we live each day. I'll give you the answer. The answer's prayer. But let me also just give you another illustration. I heard somebody in the preacher when I was doing some reading talk a little bit about where Jesus clears out the temple. It's a story in the Gospels. It happens a couple of times. Once in John, it's at the beginning of Jesus' journey, and it talks about how Jesus enters the temple, and there are market traders trading for exchange of money for all the things that you need to be able to do the sacrifices. And Jesus comes in, he goes out, and then he comes back and he clears the temple. He clears them out because they are disrupting the house of God. And this person takes that story and gives it, for me, what was a completely different light and a new way of making it an allegory for us. Because, as I said before, that we are now the temple of God, Christ in us. So what does it mean for Christ to come into our lives and to clear out the stuff that's stopping the presence of God being more present in our life? I know in my life that means a few things. That's meant about clearing out the aspects of my life where I keep wanting to do things on my own strength, where I want to kind of manage everything and to find my security, identity, and all that sort of stuff in my own thing by achieving stuff. How do I let go of that and enable God to shine a light? I need to let go of, at times, always coming to God with my shopping list of things, or coming to God where I'm praying always with that intercessory type of prayer, where I'm sort of praying, yeah, God, can you do this, and can you help me with that, and can you do this, and can you do that? I'm not saying that that's wrong. We need those times, and God welcomes that. But actually, we also need times where we come to God without an agenda, and we actually want to sit and wait on him and say, God, this is me. I'm here. What's going to be brought up? Some people find that really difficult. I heard a great story of one person who spoke to their preacher about that, and the person said, take your knitting. Sit there and do your knitting. And actually, they found that much more helpful because they were just doing some knitting, doing something. Other people find drawing or colouring helpful, a bit of action, bit of thing, but actually this sense of waiting and waiting on God. Other people find breath prayers helpful. There are lots of, in our Christian tradition, there are lots of different ways to help us be able to also engage in this type of prayer where we're waiting. And waiting to see and wait for God's experience of God's union with us, to be aware of his presence, not just out in the world, but within our very being. So that's kind of one aspect. If it's something that you're really struggling with, and actually it's something that's really on your heart, then do come and either speak to Jen, myself, or somebody here if you're here, or if you're online, then do get in contact with the office. I think the numbers come up after the service. Do get in contact, and we'll either through exchange of email or Zoom or meeting in person. We'd love to journey with you to help you in that. But what does this really mean for us today? Let's get it really practical. What does this mean today? I'm going to give some examples of what it's meant to me over this last couple of years. It's meant that in the darkest situation, there's been a source of joy and a hope that's not dependent upon outcomes and the world around us. When things have been really difficult, I can't explain it, and I know it's not everyone's experience, but I've just had joy. I've just had a presence within me that's just meant, I know I don't understand what's going on, I know it doesn't seem fair or right, but I just got a joy in my heart, and I can't quite explain it, and it doesn't make sense. And I know that that's just a gift of God. It means that Christ is always with us, even when we don't have that experience, or we can't remember necessarily that experience. That doesn't mean that Christ is not with us, because it says here that Christ is in us. So even when we don't feel it and we might feel dark and alone, actually he is there. It means that actually there have been times where again, it just feels like God's laughing. There's been a particularly funny situation, or there's been a bit of irony where I've said, God, don't let this happen, and it happens. And I'm kind of like, and God, God's got a sense of humor if you've been journeying with God for a while. And there's just a sense of God laughter. It's okay, I'll be with you. But with that, so yeah, in the dark and in the joy. And at times, there have been times when I've actually felt completely hopeless in the face of everything that's happening in the world at the moment. All the stuff that's going on, it can feel hopeless. And yet I can testify to a hope. I can testify to a hope that God is at work, even when it might not seem like it. I can testify to a hope that God is at work, that God is maturing in me, a grounding in who God is that can weather the storms, that doesn't get blown around when things around me and in the world seem bleak and dark. But it also means that actually we have an assurance of a future of glory, that the world around us has a future assurance of glory, that creation has an assurance of a future of glory, because it's about Christ, his reconciling nature and restoration of the world. It's not based on us. That's not license to continue to harm the planet and everything else. But actually, when things seem bleak, we can have assurance. And there's assurance that even now, when I experience my half-healing, half-brokenness, at times even this week, where I've just had old things that I thought I got through flare up again in my life. And I thought I dealt with this, God. And yet, those other feelings that came up in me. And yet I know that there's a hope that one day all of that will go, that I will be fully healed, that the tears will fully stop. And that's our ultimate hope. For me, for you, and for you that might be watching. And it's our hope, even if you don't have that hope now. Because this verse that we've been looking at, Christ in us, the hope of glory, is not just an individual thing, but it's a corporate thing. It's that Christ is in us as a community of believers. We're about to take communion. One of the words that are often said at the communion is that through this bread broken, we are one. We are one body because of the bread broken and shared between us. And so that's my prayer as well, that we recognize and we have this hope, and we recognize and see this shared Christ in us as a community. As you look in one another, you see Christ, God the divine, present in each of us. So let me finish with the words from Paul, because as I said at the start, his stutterings are more clear than mine. So to us all, may our hearts be encouraged and united in love, so that they may have all the riches of assured understanding, and that the knowledge of God's mystery, that is Christ himself, in whom are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge, be ours. Amen.